The Barren Author, Episode 1, Let No Man Belong.
Brigadier? Brigadier? Can you hear me? Am I coming through loud and clear?
How's a bell?
Good.
One that's been wrung by the neck. Ha ha!
Oh.
Oh, no, don't worry. You are sensible of speech, and I have exceptional hearing. We shall make do and mend, shall we not? OK, my camera's on, my visage before you. Shall we begin?
Oh, switching my camera on now.
There you are. How nice to see you.
It's nice to see you too.
Oh, kind of you to say, but I suspect a lie. My features are remarkable, one scar spaghettied on top of another, but few would call my war-torn complexion handsome. It can't possibly be nice to see me. You've been sent by your elders and your betters to check up on the noble brigadier and his literary endeavours.
Well...
No need to apologise. I'm at your disposal. I finished required pages. I have them here. They're handwritten.
Many people find it easier to handwrite their thoughts. They find it easier to...
Oh, yes, achieve a flow state using pen and paper. Yes, I'm familiar with the psychology of optimal experience. I met him once, you know.
Who?
Csikszentmihalyi. He was exceptionally dull. Well, it was a dull evening, really. Dons getting drunk on port and prestige while the visiting professor turned up, belle of the ball, in some astonishing trousers. At first I was quite taken by his twill weave, but then he ruined my admiration by opening his mouth. I took issue with his views on autotelic personalities, and before I knew it, a delicious bottle of Quinta della Rosa was thrown in my direction and fisticuffs ensued. So much for going with the flow, eh? I did, however, manage to procure his trousers, which I thought fair compensation, considering I ended up with a black eye and a lifetime ban from entering Corpus Christi.
Is that in your pages?
What, that? Put that in? I'd be lucky to get a yawn out of my readers with that mere trifle. Besides, I was focusing on my younger days. You know, Smith, there's something satisfying about using longhand to describe the days when I was short.
Longhand? Yes. Look, do you want to type them up and email them over?
Type, yes. Email, no. These words are far too brave for the internet. Given that extraordinarily dangerous content that some of my experiences contain, I think it would be safer to trust in ink over encryption, don't you? It would not do to risk interference. The World Wide Web is a sticky place, and I wouldn't wish to become entangled there, thank you very much. No doubt you Googled me. And found virtually nothing, no doubt, as I've worked very hard to keep it that way. You are not recording this session, are you?
No.
Then I shall read the first extract of my endeavours. You suggested Rakar.
I thought that would be a helpful start.
You're not ready for Rakar. I think it would be best for my readers to first understand my character. If they understand and trust the man at the centre of these extraordinary and world-changing events, then they will understand what happened in that magnificent city.
Whatever you think best.
Then I shall begin with my surname, Munchausen. German blood in an Englishman's body. A bold combination that would make Darwin weak at his evolutionary knees. Indeed, my family are descended from the very same royal bloodline as those who now inhabit Buckingham Palace. Ah, yes. My upper lip will be forever stiff. Try as I might, wobble it will not. A truly excellent platform for the growth of a formidable moustache.
Yes. It's certainly striking.
Yes, and difficult to care for. Although in my teenage years I found that hair was unwilling to make itself at home on my adolescent body. I was a contradiction at 15. My muscle mass was considerably advanced due to my regular hobbies of competitive weightlifting and Jeet Kune Do, while My skin had the translucent beauty of a young servant girl in a painting by Vermeer. My schoolfellows didn't know whether to invite me to the rugby or buy me flowers. And it didn't help, of course, that I was unusually bright and that I curried favour with the headmaster, having once saved his life on a sports day with my quick thinking and skilled use of an orthopaedically enhanced javelin. All these things conspired to make me somewhat different from those around me, and after an unfortunate and abrasive final encounter with the junior Latin teacher, I found myself looking to pastures new. And so I hopped over the school fence, with only the moonlight for company. I was an innocent then, and I had no thought in my head as to where I was running. I only knew what I was running away from. Eventually, after some 7 or 8 hours, I stopped for breath and found myself past midnight at some kind of industrial harbour. And though it was night, the place was filled with the clank and grind of hard steel as ships were loaded and unloaded by rusted cranes, lit up by cold blue lights and the sparks of a welder's torch. And although the rough grey seas stretched out into the dark, I couldn't smell its salt, for all that was in my nose was the scent of iron and sweat and blood. "Goose, you coppers, you piddy boy," came a voice in my ear. I spun around and saw the biggest man I'd ever seen in my life. "Goose, you casser for a scalp, you," he says with a voice like semi-digested gravel. I have to confess that, as a young boy, staring up into the face of a man who looked like a road accident, I was less sure of my chances, and part of me wanted to flee, but my feet had the final say in the matter and stuck me frozen to the spot. "You gotta give me your spondulas or I'll lamp you to some timber," he says, coming towards me with a nasty grin on his face. At least I think it was a grin. It was hard to tell, as most of his face was covered in tattoos. I might have confused it with the tail of the Antichrist, which was inked across his left cheek. "Spondulies," he repeated, and I did become somewhat fearful of what my spondulies might be, and what he might do were he to take possession of them, until I realized he meant cash. "Cash, wee man!" And despite the unwelcome introduction of the fellow's knife, I was relieved. The House of Munchausen, although not independently wealthy, has always found ways to turn an honest penny. Indeed, during my time at school, I used my computer skills to generate an untraceable prototype of a cryptocurrency which had made me a considerable profit. In fact, it was a dispute over how untraceable it was that got me into trouble with that same Latin master after he was caught browsing a curious website celebrating the glories of various illegal badger culls across Eastern Europe. "No," said this giant Glaswegian, knife in hand, coming close. His breath stank like a bottle bank in July. "Of course, yes, right away, sir," say I, and immediately reached into my pocket to give him all that I had. It was then that my schooling let me down. You see, I was still wearing my uniform, and so I stuck my hand in my pocket, that is to say, one of my pockets. The English, it turns out, have a passion for the pocket, and the privileged Englishman is the very worst affected. For some reason, that elite school to which my parents had sent me had a uniform into which was sewn a multitude of pockets. Left trouser pocket, right trouser pocket, 2 back pockets, left and right hand blazer pockets, inner blazer pocket left, inner blazer pocket right, shorthand ticket pocket, glasses pocket, lower back short change pocket, kerchief pocket, upper left wide pocket, for the carrying of a small hymnal, which, in abeyance to school rules, we were required to carry at all times, spare waist pocket, inner separating pocket. I could go on. I could go on and on. My fingers began frantically to search every pouch for my wallet, but my wallet wasn't to be found. In fact, in my youthful foolishness, I'd fled my school without any spondulies whatsoever. The robber's face began to darken, and I could tell that the various substances that the fellow imbibed to hold back his demons were beginning to lose their chemical restraint. Both rage and knife were about to strike. "Wait!" I cried, and began another search. Whereas I had an abundance of empty pockets, the Glaswegian was short on everything, including patience. He lunged at me, and I found myself on my back, with only the small hymn book to defend myself from his erratic blows. I have to admit that I've never subscribed to the benefits of organised religion, and the dull mornings spent being forced to sing 100 dreary hymns really didn't endear me to the faith. Yet now it was the very thickness of this short volume which enabled me to fend off the sharp blade of my fierce attacker. The giant, who, by my reckoning, must have been 20 to 25 stone, began to weary under the weight of his labours, and his breath began to fail. I turned the tide with a swift thrust of hymns ancient and modern into the fellow's abdomen, and he responded by knocking me 3 meters across the cobbled quay. But the damage was done. He was spent, and bowed at the waist, enabling me to have the first clear shot at his head. Even then he towered above his humble surroundings. I threw my volume directly at his temple and, like a tiny David facing a meth-fueled Goliath, I was finally able to fell the beast. Unfortunately, when 350 pounds of 7-foot sailor falls, it tends to attract a great deal of attention. A perimeter security light was shone upon me, a body at my feet and blood on my hands, the harbour path scattered with Victorian hymns, a silver knife and torn extracts from the Book of Daniel. Well, the whole scene must have looked like I was on work experience at a serial killer school. I was only 17 years old, and already I was in a great deal of bother. A wiser man would have stayed to explain himself, but I found myself once again on the run. For some reason I'd picked up the knife, now my only possession, and was running through the dark. Were I to be caught, no one would be in any doubt that I was the guilty party. I couldn't tell you if it was stupidity, fate, luck, or providence which first drew my eyes to a medium-sized vessel which was leaving the harbour, but drew my eyes it did. I ran towards the ship and launched myself into the air and landed on its helicopter deck. It headed out into the dark waters, oblivious to both the bloody chaos of the harbour and to my presence on board. I was at sea in more ways than one. My transport was the ship La Defensa, which, unbeknownst to me, was heading directly towards trouble. The sound of that remorseless engine, combined with the fatigue of the day's adventures, made me want to sleep, and so, sleep I did.
And what happened? You turned yourself in to the captain?
Alterius non sit qui sus est potest.
I'm sorry, I don't speak Latin.
Let no man belong to another that can belong to himself. What was I to do? So far in life I'd always been a prisoner. Of my age, of my parents, of my school. Was I to hand the captain my very hands for him to clap them into irons? What if he turned the ship around and took me back to face criminal charges? No, not a chance. I was free, and I intended to stay that way. The ship was large, a 2-ton vessel supplied with 2 large inflatables, 3 small rigid landing craft, large enough for a pubescent mouse like me to hide in. At least until we were so far out to sea it would be impossible for them to take me back, and so I climbed under the tarpaulin of one of the small boats and finally shut my eyes.
When I suggested you write down your experiences, this isn't exactly what I had in mind.
When I awoke, I found myself staring into the face of the most extraordinary woman. I say face, but it was more a mass of thick blonde hair dancing in the north wind. A bonfire of follicles, tempest-tossed.
You like to talk about hair a lot. Why?
Yes, it's a running theme throughout my childhood. Have you got her? She said with velvet voice that somehow managed to cut through the noise of the waves which carried us. What are you doing here? I didn't speak Norwegian then, as I do now, but it was clear what she was asking. Have you got her? She asked again. I could respond with the only passport I had to hand, a single word of hope that has many a time got men of our nation through tricky foreign waters since the days of the Empire. English? I offered. And it was then that the wind ceased and the sun came out and shone upon my face. I was haloed in a golden light. I looked like a young Myrna Loy. Her hair fell from gravity, finally revealing her face. She was young, no more than 20, with piercing blue eyes and a button nose and a complexion like sandpaper, and I mean the tough stuff, you know, the kind you use to strip rust off JCBs. Already there was a chemistry between us. "Do you speak English?" I asked. "Of course," she said, in a slightly begrudging European tone which implies they all speak about 4 languages, whereas we can barely manage our own. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was tender now, and although her scent was that of a paraffin heater, I wanted more than anything to kiss her. I don't know, I said. And it was true. I was lost. Alterius non sit qui sus es potest. I did not belong anywhere. I did not belong to anyone, and I certainly didn't belong to myself. The ship that now kept us from plunging into the deep knew what it was for and where it was going. I didn't even know who I was. "Come with me, English," she said, holding out a hand, and I took it as she led me from my hiding place towards the cabins. Where are we going?" I asked, and I realized I was trembling. "The Southern Ocean," she breathed. And for that moment I knew more than anything. I wanted to follow her there, the Southern Ocean, follow her there to the other side of the world. For 6 days and 5 nights we sailed. I worked my passage in the engine room and the galley. I wasn't much use, and I think my list of labours was a ploy to keep me occupied instead of actually contributing to the noble mission.
Noble mission?
Oh, did I not say?
No.
Oh, forgive me. In my enthusiasm, I've missed a key part of the story. Let me just making a note. Fill in the blanks and etc. etc.
You were on a noble mission?
Oh, yes. It turns out Marja, she of the golden hair and the blistered hands, was not the only crew member. There were 7 of them, the captain from Iceland, 3 professional sailors, all European, a Peruvian photojournalist, an Indian medic, and, an engineer from the Tottenham Court Road. Now, they talked about taking me back, going so far as to radio the authorities back in England, but that would have compromised their ultimate mission. You see, time was against them, and they had to reach certain waters before the Japanese got to them first. You see, the ship belonged to an activist organisation. It was the beginning of the commercial hunting season. The whalers were en route to warm waters where the blues, the Finns and the humpbacks would be playfully swimming towards their own destruction. The politicians had argued against whaling. They'd made strongly worded speeches in the United Nations, but it was all just words. A slaughter was coming, and there was only one thing with a chance of stopping it: La Defensa. I began to love that old bucket almost as much as I loved Marja with her passion for life and her 60-a-day habit. When we kissed, I wasn't entirely sure I wasn't at risk of lung cancer, but then I've always had a remarkable immune system, and the passions of the young love, they don't stop to consider such things. "Du tilla Hammond," she whispered to me as we held hands in the heart of the Southern Sea. "You belong to me." We were stood on the deck in the early morning watching the dolphins leap and play in the warm blue. And they leapt with such grace and skill, it seemed to me they were more like birds in flight than fish in water. The world was upside down, the sea like the sky, with these creatures soaring past us with joy and jubilance, a flock of happiness. My Marja held my hand. "Du tilla Hammond." And I gazed back, "Ja, for Evid og Elted, for de min engel, og jeg vil alltid være hot dog." For I'd picked up a little bit of Norwegian by then, and we were in love. At the ends of the earth, trying to prevent the end of the earth. She knelt before me and from a pocket took out a ring pull peeled from the top of one of the many tins of lentils which supplied our stores. "English boy, will you? A whale! By God! It was a blue whale bursting from the deep. The exploding waters hit us both, scattering us apart across the deck. The weight knocked the ship hard, and we tilted at 45 degrees. Marja was flung north up deck, whereas I slid down towards where La Defensa was tipped so hard she was nearly taking in water. Never in our brief time together had we ever been this far apart. "They do not sing outside! They do not sing outside!" It was the captain with tears in his eyes. In all his life he'd never heard whale song above water. The ship recovered its balance, and both Marja and I slid back towards each other in the centre of the deck. We fitted perfectly. Wet through and deliriously happy. "Engines off!" cries the captain. And we stand and do nothing. The Peruvian journalist stopped filming. The medic holds his heart. We stand, and the melody fills our souls. "Surface vocalization," says the captain. "It's not possible." And I look at Marja, and I listen to the whale, and from the core of my soul, I find myself saying the words which have kept me going all of my life. Everything, I say, everything is possible. Explosions! Explosions interrupted the song of the whale. What was happening? The whale went under, and another wake hit our ship. We recover. "Engines!" shouts the captain. "Engines!" But we find ourselves too stunned to move. And it was then that I saw it. A Japanese whaler trying to stun the whales with explosives before they could move in for the kill. I sprang to the cabin only to find Alexandru, one of the sailors, out cold, having hit his head on the control panel after one of the blasts. He was bleeding. "Engines!" screams the captain, and I hit the switch. The captain rushes in and takes the wheel. I get bandages for Alexandru. All's a blur. Our whale is gone, but it turns out the whaling ship was not firing on us, but on a herd of humpbacks a little to the east. They're ahead, but we have the faster ship and nothing to lose but the lives of those incredible creatures. Marja was hailing the fishermen and warning them in fluent Hirangi that they were broaching international law. They refused to engage. All the while, the captain steered us a course between the herd and the approaching whaler. The whalers were big, our ship was not small, but in their industrial shadow we began to feel very small indeed. We are between the hunters and their prey. They cannot go around, for to change course would lose them time, and the humpbacks were already making progress. They're coming towards us, relentless. We will not move. They will not stop. Marja shuts down the comms. They will not listen. We should move, I say. Nay, says Marja. This is why we're here. I reach out for her hand, but she's too far away. And that is, well, you know, when. The blue whale returned from the depths, breaking the surface and striking the side of the whaler with the ferocity of an earthquake. The whaler was smashed like an egg under the weight of the mighty blue. Down it went, men and all, down to the ocean floor. And though the blue doesn't hit us directly, the power of the upturned sea is now forced against us and over us and under us and in us. And before I knew it, La Defensa was wrenched down and down and down into a whirlpool of water and confusion. And I realize I'm going to die. It had never occurred to me that one day I wouldn't exist. And as the water filled my lungs, I realized that for so long I'd assumed that I would always live. Life, after all, had been my constant companion ever since I was born. Perhaps now we were finally to part company. I went unwillingly into the dark, happy at least that I'd played a part in preserving the lives of other creatures, even in my short few years. And I woke up on the beach of a remote island. The whaler was gone. La Defensa was gone. Marja was gone. I was alone. Alterius non sit qui sus es potest. Let no man belong to another that can belong to himself. Fine words, but I wanted to belong to another. I wanted to belong to Marja. My lips were covered in salt, my skin burnt by the sun, and my heart fully broken.
Was she Did you find her again?
Don't jump the gun, these are only the first few pages.
Of an extraordinary life.
Well, yes. All lives are extraordinary, that's why the loss of one of them is so very great. Funnily enough, some years later, I calculated that the day I woke up on Stewart Island— it's an odd name for an island, I always thought, Stewart. Anyway, the day I woke up on Stewart was actually my 18th birthday.
Really?
I was officially an adult, a man. And more than that, I'd come to a striking realisation that was to determine the course of the rest of my life.
And what was that?
Oh, it was very simple. I was going to save the entire world.
You...
Oh, yes. I mean, a few whales was just the start. Turns out I'd got the bug for saving things. I really felt the irrepressible urge to keep on saving lives. I became addicted. Well, like a hobby, like stamp collecting, only with higher stakes, Well, we all know the world's broken, Smith. The question for me became, could I be the one to fix it? So I went to Russia and got involved with the post-Soviet mafia, but, that's another story.
Another story?
Well, yes, it involves a polar bear, Elton John, and an international ring of tribute artistes. It's not for the faint of heart, and honestly, if I could go back, I wouldn't have put those glasses on in the first place. OK, shall we say same time next week?
You're ending this, but we can't...
What? Ending it? Oh, no, my dear Smith. This is just the beginning.